We've got another great story to share with you today, an inspiring journey into local government leadership, because that's what we do here on the Halting Winter podcast. We tell the stories behind the titles, the unique paths into public service, and the moments that shape how these leaders show up, even when the work gets heavy. Every day, local government quietly makes modern life possible, and behind every service is a person doing work that often goes unseen. This is the Halting Winter podcast, and I'm Seth Winterhalter. Every week, I have the pleasure of sitting down with local government leaders from across the country that remind us where government really lives, locally, doing the work that truly matters. This is the work that builds belonging. Before we hear today's conversation, I want to take a moment to thank our sponsors. Tyler Technologies has been exclusively serving the public sector since 1998, partnering with cities and counties to make their work more manageable, more connected, and more effective. From smarter budgeting to artificial intelligence, Tyler equips local governments with software and solutions that help leaders serve with clarity, efficiency, and impact. You can explore a variety of free resources at tylertech.com/winter. That's tylertech.com/winter. And if today's conversation resonates with you, I want to invite you to check out the Municipal Leadership Development Circle. It's a global community of local government leaders who are committed to growing together, supporting one another, and leading well in the middle of municipal pressure. You can learn more about the MLDC at haltingwinter.com/MLDC. That's haltingwinter.com/MLDC. And now, let's turn to today's conversation. My guest on the podcast today is Dwight Boddorf, Borough Manager in Tarentum. Pronounce it for me. There we go. Tarentum. See, it's always these names. Tarentum Borough, Pennsylvania. Author of the brand new book, The Municipal Battlefield, Leading, Surviving, and Winning in Small Town Government. It's now available for pre-order. In fact, by the time you listen to this, it'll already be out because it comes out this Wednesday, April 1st. And so, man, we've got so much to dive into. Not only the new book, your really amazing career, but again, the story of your life already from the tidbits I know is inspiring. It is going to help young people, I think, really look at their life and say, there is no box. There's just choices. And it isn't, and there are no excuses. You can get through. I think your story is going to be a story of perseverance and thinking creatively about how you handle the real stuff of life and still aspire and still lead a life of impact. So, Dwight, welcome to the podcast. It's going to be real fun to unpack this story today.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here, and I enjoy the podcast and the work that you've put out so far.
I appreciate that. Well, before we get to the new book and, man, all that's kind of going on in Tarentum. I've got to figure out all the pronunciations. See, I was in Wisconsin last month, and they've got some wicked pronunciations of names too. But it's fun to see kind of all the influences and all the names across the country. Well, here we go. Let's take us back. Take us back to the beginning. Where were you born, and kind of what has shaped? Again, you have a dynamic story, so I can't wait to unpack it. But let's get into it. Tell us about the childhood that really shaped you and started you on this unique journey.
Yep. So I was born in DuBois, Pennsylvania, which is about 2 hours north of Pittsburgh, for anyone not familiar with the area. I had a little bit of an unstable childhood. I moved around a lot. I lived with my grandparents for a couple years. Ultimately ended up in Butler, Pennsylvania, which is about 45 minutes north of Pittsburgh for 4th through part of 10th grade. At 10th grade, I was kicked out of my mom and stepdad's house, and at 17, I was homeless. So I relied on the generosity of friends and some extended family members to get me through high school. From there, I ended up going into the Marine Corps. The Marines provided some stability, finance, a path forward for me that I wouldn't have otherwise had. I didn't even know that college really was a thing at the time, and for anybody who has been a homeless youth, it's not exactly like the guidance counselors and colleges are beating down your door to bring you on board. So Marines it was. I had planned on making a career out of the Marines. I went into what was called light armored reconnaissance. So think somewhere between a tank and a Humvee. They are 8-wheeled vehicles that are part of the infantry and often called the tip of the spear. We're usually the first ones into any type of engagement because it is a highly mobile platform that provides a lot of firepower. The Marines were very beneficial for me. It gave me structure, it gave me training, it gave me friends, things that I didn't really otherwise have. And so it was a great fit. Unfortunately, in October 2006, in the western part of Iraq, my vehicle was hit by an improvised explosive device, also known as an IED or a roadside bomb. 2 fellow Marines were killed in that explosion. Most of us were wounded. I had serious wounds to my skull, spine, nerves, all of those things. I spent about a month and a half recovering on a base in Iraq called Al Assad. And from there, I actually went back out to my unit and finished my tour with those remaining Marines that were there. Once I came back to the stateside, things started to get a little bit worse with my health. There was some nerve damage and some memory issues and a few other things that kind of popped up after the explosion. And so I ultimately was medically retired from the Marine Corps in 2008. And from there, had to kind of reorient my entire life. So now I'm dealing with physical disabilities. I have a few, like I said, traumatic brain injury items. So memory issues, and occasionally I'll transpose my words. So forgive me if I have some things backwards here. And had to figure out what was next. I didn't really know. The Marines was the plan. And so from there, I ended up using my GI Bill, which paid for all of my undergraduate degree at Penn State in Harrisburg. And I actually went the furthest away from the Marines that I could go. I actually went into elementary education, was my major for my undergrad. While I was doing that, I was also simultaneously working at Penn State through my GI Bill through a program called VA Work Study. And my job was to help fellow veterans that were coming to the school to educate them about their benefits, about financial aid, and also maybe some of their other VA benefits. That happened to be at the same time that the new GI Bill was coming out. So for those who are not familiar with the GI Bill, there's actually 6 or 7 different types of the GI Bill, and it depends on when you were in, how long you served. So reservists will have a different type of GI Bill than active duty. Anybody that was pre-2009 actually has a different version of anyone post-2009. And so there was this influx of veterans at the schools because of the new GI Bill that really, for the first time since World War II, paid for the full tuition and housing for military members and veterans. And so while I was there, I was able to help them build the programs with veterans, kind of figure out this new GI Bill with the school at the same time that I was doing my student teaching and learning. Once I got into the student teaching, although I really, really liked it, I was in 3rd grade, it became clear to me that with my disabilities that I was not going to be able to stand that long with the kids. I had a hard time getting up and down, kneeling beside the desk, answering questions. I really liked playing kickball with the kids, but that became very difficult as well with my disabilities. So I finished my degree and quickly realized that this also was not going to work. Anytime that you're dealing with pain management and one that is there every day intermittently, it's you have to take life as it comes. You have to figure out how to adapt and what's going to work for you and what's not. So at that point, I figured, well, I need to do something. I just graduated from college, but I can't work in the field that I was aiming to work for. So I ended up translating my experience from working in the veterans office in financial aid at Penn State to working with veterans as a career path.
Okay. This is so fascinating. So let's go back and unpack before we get too far along. Let's go back because already now you have multiple moments in your life where it would be easy to become a victim, to look at the negative and just tap out and make, decisions that really take you out of the game. that would
Yeah.
never allow you to even be where you're at today. So what I want to go back when you're a child and you're going through all, again, you're kind of displaced, you're all over the place, you're living with different people. And then you have this moment where it's just like, it seems like, well, maybe I'm not going to assume. You tell us what's going on in the mindset of this kid that's just facing what seems to be adversity, facing like, are you wanted? Do you have, like you say, college is even on the path, like, or even in the mindset, like, was there purpose? Did you desire anything at that age? Was it just kind of survival?
It was a little bit of survival and a little bit of, I'm not going to let these people push me down. A little bit of, anger, right? And a little bit of, I'll show you, you're not going to tell me that I'm not able to do anything or that I'm not worth anything. I'll make it on my own was really kind of the attitude.
That's interesting. What do you think? So I have this, I don't know if it's a theory. I have this idea that I think the well of adversity is actually one of the most powerful motivators. It's just a well that you can only dip from for so long before it goes into real bitterness and a real unhealthy kind of chip on your shoulder. I do think that it can be a strong, I just remember moments in my own story where it was that same thing. It was like, I'm going to show you, like, you tell me I can't do it. I'm going to do it and to take this up. And I think that can be a powerful motivator, and to not tap into some of that, I think might be a mistake. If you're like, oh, I don't want, I think it can get you, but it can. Was there a time was there any time where maybe it got unhealthy, where it felt like, man, this is not now inspiration. This is now, I'm just seeing things through a very jaded viewpoint.
Yeah, I will say so. Moving around as a kid, you kind of learn to deal with it, right? You're going to be here for a couple months. You're going to be here. I think what for me was challenging, where it became too much, is when I was no longer welcome in my own home for reasons that I still don't know to this day. I came home on my 16th birthday. There was a bag packed. There was no kind of reasons as to why. Then, basically be gone with you. And, up until that point, despite the adversity and moving around a lot, I was I was an ROTC, I was a cross country student, A's and B's. Like I did everything that a good kid and teenager was supposed to do. And when that kind of rug gets pulled out from underneath you, well, what's the point in doing all of this? What's the point in going to school? What's the point in getting good grades? What's the point in being involved if none of it matters anyway? So that first year after I was kicked out, I went to go live with my estranged father for a while and kind of spiraled. I didn't go to school. I was, there were truancy charges. I fell in with some people that were a bit older, going to parties and things like that. Because again, what was the point? I was angry. I was jaded. I was whatever. And then it got to a point that my dad, at that point, was like, listen, like, we can't keep doing this. Like, you can't stay here anymore if you're going to be doing these things. And at that point, when I ended up homeless at 17, it was a kind of, I might need to rethink this type of situation, right? And so I kind of had the option of either my life was going to spiral or I needed to buckle down and figure it out and do it on my own. And I was fortunate enough, like I said, I had some family friends and friends from school that I was able to kind of crash at their houses. And, somebody ended up taking me in eventually and getting guardianship of me. But it was that kind of moment of like, I'm not going to let the world keep me down, but I need to like pull my own weight, so to speak. It very easily could have went that, I would have ended up in jail somewhere to this day. But I wasn't ready to give up yet at that point.
You joined the military, and specifically, again, there's the different branches. The Marine Corps, I think they all kind of have this community, feel, and they definitely, if for a young guy who has almost kind of been that alone, right? It feels like maybe you've had your back you've had backs turned on you. And so to find a place with a group, and Marine Corps just seems to be even to the nth extreme, like like you are in, right? And I would think your story even, I don't want to assume, but your story even speaks to that, where you get blown up and yet you want to get back to the guys. You want to, like, it's kind of like that. It's kind of like you see in the movies, like someone shot or something and they just like adrenaline up to get back in the game. Like they're not going to let. And so, like you said, like you're like, we got to get back. Like, and it wasn't until after, when you come back stateside, that you start to really see the effects of what that happened. And I think that's what can happen is your body just kind of goes, no, like this is the mission. I'm going to, the human body just has incredible ability to persevere and to kind of ignore the things that, right, probably we should pay attention to. Yeah. And so talk about the Marine Corps in that, especially out of what you came to, or what you experienced and came out of to join that. And what did that do for you to find community and to find people and to find, purpose?
Oh, that's a good question. It did a lot for me, both emotionally, psychologically, financially, right? It provided a sense of security, Maslow's hierarchy, right? Things that I didn't have before. So when you are bouncing around from place to place, you don't know where your next meal is coming from, to going to a place that takes care of all that for you. For me, really was one of those life-changing, the world maybe isn't so bad. Here are these people that are going to take you in. They're going to train you. They're going to provide you with some of the best friends that you'll ever have. They'll make sure that you have housing. They'll make sure that you have food. And oh, by the way, they'll train you to do something. It was just kind of one of those, this is where I'm supposed to be moments. And things were great. I excelled at training. I made a lot of different friends. For the first time in my life, I was actually able to save some money and get a vehicle of my own. I've never had, I couldn't really travel before. And so now I have this actual freedom in terms of finances and motor vehicles that I didn't have before. I had friends that were willing to take me places and, teach me things. And it was just one of those, like I said, maybe the world's not so bad type of experiences. So I really, really had planned on making that my, that was it. That was my career. That was my life. I found where I'm supposed to be. And then fast forward to 2006 in Iraq. I'd only been there at that point for 2 months. We were in the western part, the Al Anbar province of Iraq, so closer to the Syrian border. And so this was right during kind of the middle of the surge in like 05, 06, 07, where they sent more and more troops over. And, things were, you don't really know what to expect when you get into combat, right? People tell you, but you don't really know until you're there. The emotions, the fear, the adrenaline, all of it. And really, like, when that bomb hit, that IED, like, I didn't know. I was, instantly unconscious. I remember bits and pieces of it. I remember waking up and I remember dragging myself up the hill. I remember the different sounds and smells and screaming and all of those things. And then a couple hours later, once I got medevaced and, the helicopter back there, then it really hits you of what's going on, and that my life has just changed. And some of my friends that I, had just got into this kind of club, this circle, these are great people that I'm going to be with for the next 20 years, were taken away. And it's difficult to deal with at 19, that you finally find a place where you belong, and then to have some of that ripped from you is very difficult. And at the same time, I was in a wheelchair for a good couple of weeks. I could not use my right hand. I was having memory issues and things like that. So I'm trying to deal with all of these things at once, and still be the tough Marine, right? Because nobody wants to be the Marine who can't handle all that stuff. And as the weeks went by and I did rehab and I did all of these other things, I slowly regained the function of my hand. I was able to go back running things again. I had some pain in my spine, but I figured it was just some muscle aches from, surviving a bomb. And you're right. I wanted to go back. Not everybody that was in that bomb with me that survived, they didn't choose to go back. There were some people that went back to the United States. I chose to go back to stick it out with my friends and finish the mission. I didn't want them to be by themselves after they had just lost some people, and just provide that sense of like, we started this together, we're going to finish it together.
April is National County Government Month. It's a time to recognize the amazing work counties do to keep our communities running. From public safety and courts to health services, infrastructure, and everything in between, counties carry an enormous responsibility, and they do it in ways most people never see. And right now, one of the biggest conversations happening across county and local government is how artificial intelligence can help support that work. You know who's helping lead that conversation in local government? That's right, it's Tyler Technologies. Tyler's been helping counties and local governments apply AI in some significant ways, streamlining routine tasks, improving access to information, and helping staff spend more time focused on serving their communities. To help leaders understand what's possible, Tyler has released a brand new ebook. It's called AI for Impact: Proven Results for Government. It highlights inspiring examples of organizations already using AI to strengthen operations, to improve insights, and to make government services easier for residents to navigate. The best part, that ebook is free. You can download it today at tylertech.com/winter. Again, that's tylertech.com/winter. Now, back to the conversation. It's such an amazing story in that you have this adversity in childhood, and you find then a place of almost community, of security. Like you said, you get your car for the first time. You're able to kind of see a different vision for your life. And then all of a sudden that's stolen from you in this moment of chaos. This bomb explodes. Life feels like it's changing. What is this? And yet you kind of push it down to, like you say, finish the mission. We got to stick this out. And then all of a sudden it becomes clear that this is not going to be a viable career choice. So the thing that feels stable, I just can't imagine in a life of kind of instability, to find stability and then have it ripped from you to still stay. Even though you have the GI Bill, some people would have just tapped out and said, what's the point? Now it's the second time the world's telling me something, and yet you're like, no, I'm going to find this. Again, I could stay so long in this story, but I want to be mindful of your time. Then you stay apart and you go to Penn State University and you start studying, again, like you said, kind of a radical, opposite pendulum. I'm gonna teach little kids, and you're doing this. You're doing your student teach. You're learning it, and it's like, this is great. Then you do your student teaching and go, oh my gosh, some of the realities of my life now, simply bending down and talking to a kid or playing kickball, are not realities for my long term. Like, there's no way I can do this the way I want to be engaged and involved. Now you have a third moment where it's like you can't really do what you're going to do. Again, just a story. I just want young people to hear this, to go, no matter what's thrown at you, you're not alone. Your story is, while it's unique, you're not the only one who's faced challenges in life. There are other people like you that have that reality, and you just got to keep going. You just got to keep going. You know what? My destiny is not negative. It's not downward. It's upward. It's forward. We're going to figure it out. And that's a story already in your young life. You are forced. You are not the opportunity. It's like, I have to figure this out. You end up at the Community College of Allegheny County. This is Pennsylvania, doing what you said. You kind of figured out what you were doing while you were doing your undergrad at Penn State University, helping veterans figure out their student success. Again, that college has 30,000 students. You're there for like 3 years doing this. Did it feel like, when you're there, did it feel like, okay, this is just what life is? How in the world did you kind of see and start to, and maybe tell us also, when does local government Is it here? Is it later? When does that come onto the pathway? Because I would think that you're totally in military world now. Like you're even though you're in the public side or in the community side of things, you could have stayed in military veteran services. So where does local government end up on your radar?
I could have, you're right. And I would have had, by all accounts, a pretty good career in veteran services and affairs. But so when I get to the community college, so at this time, right, I'm just done with, I just finished Penn State, moved back to the Pittsburgh region, ended up getting this job at the community college where I'm helping other veterans, but I'm also still trying to figure out at that point my own pain management, right? So it was this learning environment for me alongside the students that were coming in. So I was helping these students figure out not only their GI Bill, but helping them get access to VA healthcare. We had students that might have been in and out of homelessness once they came back from the military. We had students with substance abuse. We had students that were working 2 or 3 jobs in addition to going to school in the GI Bill. So there were all these different facets that really there was no good system in place in the region to help them. When you think about some of the large veterans populations in the country, most of them, Texas, California, Virginia, they're around active duty installations. Pennsylvania has the 4th largest number of veterans in the country, and the Pittsburgh region has the largest population in the state. But we don't have an active duty installation. So there was no place that would like galvanize all of these veterans and military individuals about this is how you get your benefits and here's the programs for transitioning. Didn't exist. And it was kind of one of those things that we built it as we went, right? So the community college, we ended up having somewhere, 1,500 and some odd veteran students that would come through, and they had all of these needs besides just education. You're not going to be successful in your school if you don't have a place to sleep at night, or if you're hungry, or all of these things. And so we learned very quickly that the new generation, my generation coming back, needed these other supports and services. So we were doing that. And personally for me, it had an added benefit of, it was almost like therapy, right? Like that there's other veterans that are struggling with the transition. There are other veterans who have injuries from wartime service, and we're making it work together. That I became more comfortable with telling my story and issues as a way to bridge the gap to these veterans and help them get benefits and health care that they otherwise didn't want to get. There was still quite a stigma coming back, veterans of kind of the old Vietnam stigma of, everyone has PTSD, everybody's broken, so on and so forth. And so we had to work through and really connect with these veterans and advocate for them to go get physical health care, mental health care, apply for their VA disability. Like, you're just starting your journey if you're coming here to the community college, and there's so much that you could do. And that was beneficial for me as well. So how all that ties into local government is we have in Pennsylvania, we have county veterans directors. These are employed by each county, mandated by the state, and they're really supposed to be that group, that person that serves as the clearinghouse for veterans benefits and access and information. And the few times that I had interacted with the one at the county, things weren't as good as they could be. And I told myself at that point, if I ever get the opportunity to go into that job at the local government as the Veterans Affairs Director, that I'm going to get there and I'm going to make things better for this region and for the veterans in this community. And so I spent the next couple years architecting my way to get into that job that out of the community college, I had applied for it when it came open. I didn't have enough experience. So from there, I said, okay, I'll go get the experience. And I went to the Department of Veterans Affairs, where I did outreach, patient advocate, and public affairs. And I did that for a couple of years until I got my experience that I could go and finally get that county veterans director job.
Okay, this is so fascinating. So again, I just want to, for the audience, this is so unique. And maybe it's just unique for me. I live, again, in Olympia, Washington, the capital city of Washington State. Joint Base Lewis McChord is a stone's throw away. It's right just north of us. And they have the big hospital there, Madigan. And so, like you say, it's an active military place. So we have a lot of veterans, and they all get their, medical stuff at the hospital there. And so, like you say, there's not an ad. I didn't know that. And Allegheny County it's the county that Pittsburgh is the center in, right? And so it's this huge county of this huge city. It's kind of like King County out here, which is where Seattle is. And that's so interesting. I've never heard of that, about a county official having being a veteran, a service agency. So your county is also engaged in that. So that's unique. So you see this position, you have this interaction and go, man, that was not good. This is hurting the ability to serve veterans. I want to, that position obviously has impact. And so, okay, I'm going to figure this out. So is it because you looked at that and said, okay, I want that. What does that need? Well, that doesn't just need, Veterans Affairs stuff. It needs an MPA or some kind of degree. What is that? What leads you back to the University of Pittsburgh? And then while you're there, you start working for the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, like you mentioned, outreach coordinator, public affairs officer, chief veterans experience officer. So you're getting this dynamic, building the resume while getting the experience to really have impact. So now it seems like you're driven by mission again. Here's the mission. Here's the role and the title that has the impact of that mission. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's fairly accurate. I went and kind of attacked it like a military battle plan, right? I said, here's my objective, and how in the world do I get here? I tried right when I had my higher education veterans experience only, and that path was blocked. And they said, well, you don't have enough experience. And I said, okay, well, how am I going to get there? And so I went to the Department of Veterans Affairs, like I said, to get my kind of broader experience in Veterans Affairs. But you are correct. That's when I also went to the University of Pittsburgh and got my master's in public administration. And, running those two things side by side, I completed my MPA, my MPPM. And then shortly after, I was at the VA for roughly about 2 years when I was able to finally get to my objective and get into the county veterans director role.
So you become the chief veterans affairs officer. This is so great, of the county of Allegheny County, Pennsylvania. Yeah. You serve in that for a couple of years, 2019 to 2021. And again, just for the audience sake, again, this county is like 1.25 mil. So this is a large county. And like you said, huge population of veterans. So you're a busy guy, I'm sure, trying to figure that out. Maybe before we get to the next stop, maybe two questions. Tell us a little bit about that position, just to highlight the need there. It sounds like it could be overwhelming to try to, like, you're probably trying to work with a lot of different organizations, trying to make sure a lot of things happen. What were some of the cool opportunities in that, and what were some of the challenges?
We did a lot of really cool things. So I had a responsibility for roughly 80,000 veterans in the region. And we did everything that was asked of us and then some more. So our primary responsibility was for veterans benefits. Now that included federal and state benefits. So helping veterans apply for their VA disability, right? So coming in and we would look at their medical records and we would set up a plan and we'd help them get a service connection for a disability, which sometimes can take, upwards of a couple of years to actually get something connected for veterans. It's an arduous process, and we were there to help the veterans through the process through the whole time. We were their interface between the VA and them, and explaining what some of these things like a nexus letter and, the different forms and things that they had to do. But we also helped them GI Bill, VA home loan, any and all veterans benefits at the federal level. Each state in the United States also has some variation of veterans benefits. So in Pennsylvania, if you are 100% disabled and a wartime veteran, then you get a real estate tax exemption, but you have to go through a process to get that as well. And those went through the county. There were other benefits for burial benefits for family members. So if spouse passes away, there's some benefits there in Pennsylvania that are available. Some scholarships, things like that. So we did all of that, but we also helped veterans connect with any other needs that they might have. So if somebody came into us and they were homeless, for example, we would take the case and we would work with them and some of the nonprofit and the social services agencies to maybe get them temporary housing, whether that is at a shelter, whether that is maybe a voucher, what's called HUD-VASH through the VA. We helped individuals get connected to maybe that they needed a lawyer for some service. We would get them connected to that. We would help the local universities, University of Pittsburgh, CMU, things like that, in doing research and outreach for veterans. And some of the really cool things that we were able to do while I was there is we did a pilot program with the Department of Veterans Affairs and our medical examiner's office on collecting data for suicide. So we have, unfortunately, everyone's kind of heard the numbers, the 22 veterans a day that commit suicide. We believe it might actually be higher, but not all the information that we get is standardized around the country. And a lot of that comes in from the medical examiner's offices in the counties, and it's followed up to the state and the federal. So what we figured out here in Allegheny County, working with our medical examiner, if someone passes away or, if unfortunately they do take their own lives, if they have no next of kin, it can be difficult for people to figure out if they're veterans or not. So the medical examiner would roll them suicide, but they would have no reliable way of identifying if these individuals are veterans or not. And so when the data sets got kicked up to the federal government and the state and in the VA, they're missing anywhere from 5 to 25% of that data that these individuals are veterans. And when you have that information, you can look for commonalities. Maybe there are things that will help future research to prevent suicide. And so we worked for quite a while, about a year and a half, with the Department of Veterans Affairs doing a data sharing agreement that the medical examiner's office would give me and my office the information for anybody who was deceased that had no next of kin. And we would actually work with the VA through their records to determine if the individual was a veteran or not, give that back to the ME, and so that we could, kind of get a better set of information on who's actually a veteran and who's not.
It seems like a work that's very, maybe it has two sides of the pendulum. Like, it's rewarding on one hand because you are helping people with the very necessities of life to help them, right? Whether that's get housing, education, deal with kind of the realities of life. But also, I'm sure you were baptized in bureaucracy. I mean, a lot of slow moving, frustrating things, because again, this is kind of like the perfect setup for government work where,
yes,
it's very missional. And especially that's why I love local government, is because you are hands-on with people. It's not just policy and ideas. These are the people in your office. How do we help them? They have problems. How can we be a good to them? But then you have to deal with the machinery of the bureaucracy and of the forms and of the dysfunctional systems. How did that, maybe even just speak to the weight of that, the duality of that, where it's encouraging to see the wins, but man, the frustration when it doesn't work.
It hit not just me, but my staff hard. We had veterans that were sick, terminally ill, and they were trying to get benefits for themselves or their family before they passed away. And waiting on either the Department of Defense to produce medical records or the VA to go through the process, we oftentimes saw a lot of veterans that would pass away before they were awarded those benefits. And then once they passed, then their family had to jump through all these other hoops and file additional forms to get retroactive pay or benefits, of that nature. It was absolutely one of the worst parts of the job. We would have veterans that we desperately tried to help for many reasons. And then unfortunately, they took their own lives or overdosed or things like that. It was hard, not just on me, but on the staff. But on the flip side, we were able to help so many people. We were able to help people get off the streets and find not just a temporary home, but a permanent home. We were able to get people connected with disability benefits that was life-changing for them, that they could retire, that, there was benefits for their family members now to go to college. So it was kind of this constant state of up and down, and learning how to deal with that, but also to deal with all of the emotions from the veterans themselves. oftentimes they would come in and they would be frustrated with the system just like us. But because we were their point of contact, sometimes they took it out on us, and you have to kind of absorb that and not be angry at the veteran. They have a justifiable reason to be upset, and try to explain to them, that the system, how it works, and also advocate for changes. Part of our job was advocacy when something like that came through that we were frustrated or the veterans were frustrated, was advocating to our state and federal lawmakers that a change needs to be made, or a new policy or a new program, for example. So it was actually that bureaucratic frustration that led me to actually get into local government for a very specific reason. We don't have as many resources as I believe that we should have here for our veterans in Allegheny County. And some of it has to do with the structure of the system. But for context, that 80,000 veterans that we have here in Allegheny County, we had 4 staff members. Not a lot. The counties around us had maybe 20 to 30,000 staff or veterans, and they had anywhere from 5 to 8 staff members. So you had these counties that significantly lower population, but much more policy driven towards assisting the veterans and staffing. There's so much more that could be done here, really, as the seat of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County and the state in terms of veterans population, but research centers. We have the University of Pittsburgh. We have Carnegie Mellon. We have a top tier VA hospital that does research. There's so many people that get dropped through the cracks because I don't believe there's enough support for the veterans here that could be fixed. And so I am not done with Allegheny County Veterans Affairs. I at this point, I said, okay, if I can't fix it as the veterans director, then the next step for me is to go be the county manager, and I will come back and fix it then. So that's when I left to go to Stowe and Tarentum to get broader experience in not just veterans operations, but government, municipal operations, public work, policing, finance, all of it, with the goal of someday going back to Allegheny County so that I can close out that loop and staff and structure that office in a way to help our region's veterans.
Let me ask you something. If culture really matters in your organization, why isn't it being built with intention? Not discussed, not delegated, actually built and then sustained with just as much intention. Here's the hard reality. Culture isn't what your organization believes. It's what your leaders tolerate, reward, and repeat. In most cities and counties, they say culture matters while leaving it completely to chance. That's why this April, we are doing something different. Inside the Municipal Leadership Development Circle, you know it as the MLDC, we're kicking off a 3-month deep dive into organizational culture. Weekly content, conversations with leaders across North America, and live training sessions from the Leadership and Culture program. We're going to work through the ideas and insights from books like Turn the Ship Around, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and Unreasonable Hospitality. But more importantly, we're going to translate those insights into how you actually lead your team in the unique context of local government. For the first time, we're opening this up in a big way. We're offering 500 memberships to the MLDC for just $500. That gives you full access to the MLDC, the weekly content, and the vibrant community of leaders from across North America. But here's where it's really over the top. We're giving 3 months of insider access to the Leadership and Culture program. That's a $2,500 value. We're doing this because transforming City Hall from the inside out isn't just optional, it is necessary, and it's necessary right now. But here's the catch. We kick off our first live training session on the topic of culture on Thursday, April 16th. And so once the 500 spots are gone, they're gone. So if you're ready to stop talking about culture and to actually start building it, I want you to head over to HaltingWinter.com/MLDC. That's HaltingWinter.com/MLDC, or simply just use the link in the show notes. Secure your spot today. Now, back to the conversation. I love it. I love how you are a man on mission, but you're very tactical about how to make that happen. It's not a lot of people, they'll be mission driven. They'll have an idea of what they want to do, right? A purpose, but they don't really reverse engineer it to figure out, well, what do I need? What are the steps? What's the education? What's the knowledge? How do I get back there? And so I love that. Again, so that's in the story. You end up going from a chief veterans affairs officer in Allegheny County to Stowe Township.
Yep.
Let's talk about Stowe and then Tarentum Borough, these two unique places, because now you're in local gov, which again is a whole new environment. Maybe speak to when you were in Allegheny County, were you pretty siloed into veterans, or did you have interactions with the other county, leaders, the county manager? And then when you come into Stowe, what was it like to become the administrator and to have to, I'm sure, a town of 6,300, you're wearing a lot of hats. You're not, like you say, now you have public works, and what in the world have I got myself into? Talk about that.
So at the county, I did interact with a lot of the other divisions routinely. So human services in particular, economic development, the county manager's office, we would go in, we'd have a meeting once a month, and Willie McCain, who has since retired from the county, who was the county manager, was a great county manager, served as something of a mentor to me. So I was fortunate that I was exposed to a very large breadth of county services that I kind of had my hand in everything, right? We did economic development for veterans. We did human services for veterans. We did research for veterans. I got involved in the geographic information system, using that for veterans. The medical examiner's office, the law office. We had a grant that we started to have a staff member, I had a staff member embedded in the jail, so that when veterans were getting out, they really kind of let me go to any department that I could figure out how to make it work with what resources we had. So it was a benefit for me that I was able to learn so much about all of the different services at the county, but also interact with all the leaders. And then I did interact with some of the municipal managers and mayors and things in the towns when we would go out and do like outreach sessions, maybe Veterans Day programs, Memorial Day programs in various towns, parades, things like that. So it was a great learning experience. Transitioning that into a smaller township. So coming from the county, even though my department was small, I had a lot of other resources, right? I could go to the legal department. I could go to public works. I could go to these very well-funded, very well-staffed, professionalized services. Going into a small town where you're it, you're running payroll, you're doing grants, you're directing public works, you're interacting with the solicitor, if not half the time, trying to interpret or give advice, politics, public relations, all of it. And so it was very much a trial by fire. I had enough breadth of experience from the county plus the education that I knew enough to kind of, muddle my way through for a couple of months. But it really, truly was a learning experience in so many facets. And it was good in a lot of respects. But the way that the position was in that particular town is I was an administrator, not a manager. So I didn't have a lot of the direct control of the departments and finances and things like that. I had responsibility for them, but no real oversight or control. And that was a bit of a challenge. And after I was there a few months, I had some recruiters start calling. And that's how I ended up in Tarentum, is I got recruited there, where they gave me full operational control of not just the normal functions, but again, Tarentum has a water and an electric system. So I had to learn not only water, but uniquely electric, which there's really no place to go learn how to do municipal electric.
That is crazy. We just had, I'm trying to think who I just had on. Same thing. It's just a unique reality. You add electric to that. And that's part of the thing about local gov. You don't learn how to do that in your MPA. You're learning the basics of, and that's why like internships and like sometimes you don't have an internship. You just got to go get a job and figure it out on the fly. And so tell us about what it's been now. Like you said, I love how you kind of set up the difference between an administrator and a manager. An administrator is usually just administrating the decisions of council, mayor, whereas manager, you do have a little more power now to figure, okay, you tell me the vision, I'm going to figure out how to implement that and make that happen. Yep. What are some of the, and just for the audience too, you're still in Tarentum, am I saying that right? Tarentum Borough is in Allegheny County. So you stayed in the county the entire time. This is northeast Pittsburgh. It's a town of about 4,100, I think, if that's right. Tell us about what are some of the challenges now of you're in the bureau manager, role. What are some of the challenges and what are some of the opportunities? What are you guys looking at, especially as you've been there since 2022? That means you came out of COVID, new realities when you come out of the pandemic, especially when you're a part of a big city, you're touching Pittsburgh. So what is it? What's it like? Tell us, give us a little feel about your bureau and what are the challenges and what are the opportunities ahead?
Well, Tarentum is great. My council is great. My staff are wonderful. The residents are awesome. But like many of the small towns around Pittsburgh and Pennsylvania, it's a post-industrial town. We used to have a lot of steel mills, glass factories, you name it, we had them here. And when they went under in the 80s, the region kind of collapsed. Some pockets of the Pittsburgh region have bounced back. Finance, medical, education. We have some world-class education institutes here. But a lot of other towns got left behind. And so, they lost a quarter to half their population. And Tarentum, back in the 60s, 70s, 80s, used to have a population of about 12,000. And now we have 4,200. So when you think about trying to maintain the infrastructure for a town that was built for 12,000, and now you have a shrinking tax base and, a third of the residents, it becomes a real challenge on doing the math for the upkeep of not just the roads and the bridges, but then the utilities in our case for water and electric. A lot of these small places in Pennsylvania too, we are very parochial. So we like our borders, right? We want our small town. We don't want to have anything to do with any towns around us. Leave us alone. That model is starting to break. My third month on the job in Tarentum, the neighboring town, the chief of police, Chief Justin McIntyre, was killed in the line of duty. And one of my officers was shot. And it was one of those, talk about don't prepare you for things in graduate school, right? So it's a community mourning somebody that grew up there, who's been working there. Nobody knows quite what to do. You've got national attention, you've got regional attention, and this system that's collapsing around you in real time. And so at the point, like, we made the decision, I stepped in, things, I learned in the Marine Corps, this is one of those moments that you step up. And we ended up merging the police forces from the town next to us with our police force. In about the next 4 to 5 months, we combined the two and successfully put it through a merger. We were able to stabilize the police force for the region, provide more professional service. We're 14 officers now. We now have a K9 unit and we're getting a drone unit here shortly. But out of that came this, maybe we need to work together type of situation that really wasn't present before. And so EMS and fire services in our town and around the region too are also in danger of collapse. So I don't know how EMS is run where you're at or fire, but in Pennsylvania, most of it's volunteer fire departments, and EMS does not have a dedicated funding stream. There's no guaranteed like tax or sales or anything that funds EMS. And so they're reliant on insurance reimbursement and or the goodwill of people, or if you're lucky enough that your town donates to you to keep them funded. So we spent the last year and a half, and I'm happy to say that as of last Wednesday, we successfully merged 3 municipalities and 2 EMS providers into a single new authority. And the opportunity that I see there is for some of the other struggling services in the region and other towns to do something similar, whether that's merge police forces, EMS, fire, or regionalize. I think that's really going to be the next chapter in Pennsylvania for all of these small towns to not only survive but thrive, is to work together and to merge. And we're in Tarentum, we're kind of at the cutting edge of that.
Mm. It's so interesting because I hear this across the country. I think of Rebecca Hausman, Wisconsin. She led an effort to do the same because, again, rural Wisconsin, they just you couldn't. And you had it becomes a danger because you have so few people on. Like, again, if you're trying to, you got to get an hour to a call, like, now lives are at risk and the response. And so, yes, it is interesting to hear, the places that have to go through the shifts, right? Again, especially economic. All of a sudden, we don't have the economy. Now we've got a third of the population. How is that? And it's not just that. Also, it's not just old school. Maybe that's the wrong word. It's just the development. I mean, I grew up in a rural town. My dad, his brother were the volunteer firefighters. No one was paid when I was a kid. I remember when the chief became a paid, the community was up in arms. We don't need to pay for fire. We just need to, all volunteer and do our part. And the literal pancake breakfast and the spaghetti dinner feed paid for services. And it's just crazy to think that that's not long ago. That's a couple decades ago. And now it's like we all want more services. We all feel entitled. That's why, I'm trying to wave the flag of local government to say, yes, no one wants to pay taxes, but dear God, if we don't have the best essential services to offer, it's pitchforks and, flames.
100% agree. I think we as local government officials need to do better in communicating that out. Like there's this kind of unspoken tenet in local government, particularly for the managers of we don't do PR. We don't do community, we go only when council says, or we go only when it's reactive. And from where I'm sitting in these mergers and the needs, the world has changed. How we communicate changes, right? It's almost instant. And there's a way for us to go out, assuming your council and everything is on board with this, to communicate the need to the residents about why the fire or the EMS is the way that it is and what options that can be done. And please come to a council meeting, right? Come make your voice be heard. Come talk with us about it. And put out some things on the radio and stuff like that to really communicate. If you want these services, here's the reality. And here's the maybe 3 or 4 different ways we could fix it. Please tell us what you want, residents, because if we don't hear anything, then these services might go away. And then that's when people are up in arms, when changes are made or things like that.
Totally. And I think part of it, and that's why I just appreciate you, Dwight, coming on the podcast today. And although we're 300 plus episodes in, and yet I still feel at times like I'm pulling teeth trying to get city managers to come on because they're so trained to be behind the scenes. I mean, if I told you how many people have said, no, I don't want to be on anything because that would, and I'm like, listen, this is why though. No one knows about the position. This is why we have a problem with raising up the next generation who are going to become city managers and administrators, because no one tells their story. And I get it. You're trying to be humble. You're trying to do the work and, uphold the ICMA, whatever it is, the ethics, but you got to tell the story. And we can tell, and if we tell it at the moment of urgency, it's too late. We've got to tell the fun side of it, the inspiring side of it ahead of the need, I think, if we really want to do real storytelling and get real.
100% agree. And I think there's an important distinction there too. And I've had these conversations with some of my peers and some of the folks that, just communication does not automatically mean that you are violating any of the tenets, right? Like you can't do political communication, but that doesn't mean that you can't communicate a decision that your council has already made that impacts operations. That doesn't mean that you can't advocate for residents to be more involved. It doesn't mean that you can't tell the story of your community. There's all of these things, and I think it's become almost easier in a way just to shut everything down for communication instead of doing that nuance, because it can be hard to go up to the line without crossing it. I have some benefit of working in public affairs at the federal agency that, I can reasonably know where the line is and communicate a policy position that my council's already passed, or maybe a reason of why we changed something as silly as the spray park hours, right? But I think communication is one of those absolute fundamental pillars that you must have nowadays, because with social media, the news, um, the internet, if you don't communicate, somebody's going to fill that gap, and you're probably not going to like what they're saying. And it's easier to get your side of the story out there in a professional way from a press release or a podcast or whatever than it is to try and chase it once it's out in the public with no information.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree. Well, I want to be mindful of your time. Let's get to the new book, because again, this seems like everything that your life is directing you towards. You're thrown into, accounting, you're thrown now into township and bureau management. So you write this book called The Municipal Battlefield: Leading, Surviving, and Winning in Small Town Government. Again, the book has come out Wednesday, April 1st. At the release of this, will be past that. This is not an April Fool's joke. You've actually written the book. Tell us about it. Tell us first, why did you see the need for the book, and then what went into getting your thoughts down, and who's it for? What's your
Yep.
goal with the book?
So really kind of what it is and what it isn't. When I stepped into these roles, coming from the military, even coming from federal agencies and the county level, there were standard operating procedures for everything. There were regulations, there were rules, there were guidance. I could turn to a colleague or an agency head, a policy. This is how we do this. It was a little discombobulating when you go into local government, and it's kind of a free for all depending on where you're at, especially with smaller towns. You have Johnny, who has all the knowledge in his head for the last 45 years. And then all of a sudden he retires or he passes away, and you don't know how to do 30% of the job. And that becomes very problematic real quick. Um, there's also a lot of minefields and obstacles that if you don't have somebody, a mentor showing you how you deal with something, or the best way to handle a certain situation, whether that's public affairs or maybe you have a water main break at 2 a.m. How do you handle that? What do you document? What don't you document? There's so many things, and they're minor things, but they add up, that it would have been great if there would have been some sort of handbook or manual or even a 90-day plan of, this is how you come into a small government. This is what you need to assess. These are the people that you need to make sure that you speak with, that you get their perspective. These are the things that you need to be aware of when it comes to governance, to municipal finance, public works, legal. This is when you call the solicitor. All of those things, because if you don't know and you come from a non-traditional background where you're not coming up through like local government management, it can be hard to figure out. And some of those mistakes can be fatal to your career that could have been avoided if there was some sort of guidance. And so, really, what I ended up doing when I was looking around, I was looking for some training. I was looking for, there's got to be some sort of, in depth, something specific to Pennsylvania or even broader, and how I do these things. So give me some guidance, give me some advice. And I really had a difficult time finding something that was practical. There's a lot of academic textbooks, which are great, and the theories are helpful. That's wonderful. But again, that doesn't teach you of, when do I put out a press release? When don't I? When do I communicate to my counsel? When don't I? When do I call the solicitor? When don't I? Um, all of those things. And so what I did is I tried to write down every time that there was something that I encountered that I either wasn't unsure of, or I wasn't particularly sure in how I was going to handle that. I jotted it down, wrote it down, said, well, this would be nice if somebody told me this, or this had some guidance. Um, and so I took all that information, talked to some colleagues, talked to some staff, and really just sat down and kind of wrote out what I think needed to be explained to somebody coming into the job for the first time. So it's meant for small town government, for new municipal managers, people transitioning from either another career field or the military into the space about what you can expect within your first year, the things that you should be aware of, the things that you should go out and learn. These are the players, really reconnaissance. So, your first 60, 90 days when you're in there, some people, not everybody, has an instinct to come in and say, I'm the boss and I'm going to transform and all of these things. Whereas kind of some of the advice that I'm giving in this book really is your first 90 days are for recon, right? You need to figure out who actually, the chain of command. So there's your council, but there's always a secondary chain of command. Like there's people who have influence, maybe the old mayor, maybe it's the chief of police, maybe it's whatever. You need to figure out who those people are because they can be your enemy or your ally. You need to sit and learn how the processes work before you decide that you're going to change something so that you're not inadvertently creating problems that are second and third order effects that you don't fully understand. So kind of advice like that going through, breaking down some things on bullet points of how you can institute systems to help keep you organized. You don't need a $100,000 system for project management when your town is only 500 people. You can use something as simple as an Excel or Microsoft Outlook. There are realistic, practical tools that can help you if you're new into this job. So those are some of the things that I tried to put in there and connect some of the same themes that military personnel are aware of to kind of outline. Long story short, I think that there's a lot of similarities between combat and the municipal battlefield. It's just slightly different, right? Like the pressure is the same. There's uncertainty, there's incomplete information, there's time pressure, there's real consequences. The environment doesn't really change. It's, the laws and kind of the locality that does. That same uncertainty that you have in combat, you're going to have in local government, and you need to learn how to deal with that.
Love it. Again, I highlight one of the very first interviews we did on the podcast was with Peter Trodson. He's the city manager in Albany, Oregon, and he was in the Coast Guard, retired Coast Guard pilot. And he said that was one of the unique things when I asked him, what's the difference, coming out of a long military career of leadership, what was one of the challenging things in local gov? And he said they have no standard operating procedures. It was such a whiplash because it was like, he could go from Oregon down to Florida to New York and fly with anyone, and they all knew how to fly the same equipment because there's SOPs. And in local gov, you could be talking to a city across the street and they're totally organized different and running different. And so I think this book is a gem. I can't wait to get it myself. And it sounds like a great tool to not only, even if you are a long tenured manager and you go, I probably don't need something like this because I know, have it on your shelf. And when you run across someone who has some hunger, who says, I want to learn what it is to be a manager, maybe this is the path I want to take, hand them the book and say, go read this and come back and let's have some conversations about what you talked about. It sounds like a really great tool to even develop those who might aspire to management.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, the idea at its most fundamental level for the book was simple, right? Is the people stepping into these roles don't have a clear playbook. You learn through trial, error, pressure. And the book really was a way to shorten the curve and offer some practical tips and framework.
I love it. Well, I'll put the link below in the show notes. Make sure to check it out. And I just encourage too, because I think more books from local government need to be written. There's kind of a lack of resources in this field. And so I say that to say, go not only buy the book, but create a comment on Amazon, because that helps the algorithms point attention to it. And so a rating or 5-star rating review, a little review on it saying like the book is great, incredible, insights for us. That does a long way in trying to get the things out there. So yeah. Oh, so good. Dwight, I want to be mindful of your time. What else do you have? Anything else you'd like? Any nuggets you'd like to drop on the audience?
One other item, because I would be remiss if I did not make a plug for them. So I am currently also in a program for Stanford. I'm in a fellowship for the Hoover Institute. And this fellowship, this is in its 5th year because they're going to have another round of applications coming open soon. I would encourage anybody who is a veteran to apply for it. And really what it is it's a program that selects people doing either regional or national implications, policy change work to kind of elevate them and raise them up, scrutinize their ideas, give them a little bit of resource training, connections to really help bring their idea to life. And it has been a wonderful program. I could not recommend it enough for veterans who want to take it another step further.
I love this, and I have it in my notes. I forgot to mention it. So Stanford University through the Hoover Institution. Is it a 2-year program? Tell us a little bit about it. What are you doing in the program? It says your capstone project is a veteran to local government. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah. So this kind of actually came out of my book. So let me back up here first. So the Hoover Veteran Fellowship Program is a year-long program that's both remote and in person roughly every other month. So it's a competitive fellowship that brings in veterans across the country who are working on major public policy and leadership challenges. It's given us access to experts, research, national network to develop real-world solutions. So the program manager is Secretary Condoleezza Rice. We've been able to spend time with individuals like General Mattis, H.R. McMasters, and some really great researchers and fellows that are doing impressive work from economists to cybersecurity and everything in between. And really what they're looking for are people that can scale an idea up to impact the population as a whole. So my capstone in particular, when I noticed that there wasn't a playbook or a manual for new municipal managers, particularly in smaller governments, most of the things that are written, if there are any, typically skew towards the large cities or the counties. So for the tens of thousands of small towns out there, the playbook doesn't really exist. And also the pipeline is starting to have a problem. I'm sure you've probably talked to a few people in some of your interviews, but there's not enough younger folks that are interested or even thinking about municipal management in small towns as a career. It's a real problem that's getting worse. About 38% of all of the senior administrators in municipal government across the United States are projected to retire within the next 5 years, and we don't have the pipeline to replace them. So my project is working with an agency here in the Pittsburgh region about developing a short-term practical training program for folks who want to be municipal managers. The traditional program and pathway for the Masters of Public Administration is great. It's a super helpful foundation, but not every town needs somebody with 20 years of experience and an MPA or a PhD. So when you're a town of 500 to 700 people, you need somebody that has some baseline experience in education to come in and do the practical work, who's going to stay. When you're in a rural area and you're trying to pull in somebody with a PhD, the chances of them staying for 5, 10, 15, 20 years typically isn't that good. So the towns have to have an investment too. And what we're trying to do is create like a 3 to 4 month intensive short-term training program to help get individuals trained for small town management so that they can step in ready on day one to be a municipal manager.
So good. And yes, it totally highlights the need. I just had, in fact, this week as we record this, Peter Pernahad, who's now the Davenport director. He's been a city manager for 40 years, and now is the Davenport director out of Pepperdine University. And he just brought this up. Like, more and more young people are being put into positions of leadership and do not have the training for it, have not been developed for that. And that's a big problem. I deal with that. I've dealt a lot of that with APWA, Public Works, is where you have skilled technicians all of a sudden put into leadership because they're like, oh, you're the best of the skill. Let's put you into leader. And it's like, but leadership is not that skill. Leadership
totally
is
different skill set, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And you see this in private sector all the time. Let's take the best salesman and turn them into the manager. And it's like, then everything goes crazy because it's like sales is not management. And so you have hit on a huge reality. And yes, how do we help, especially small places? And maybe even speak to this, because I wonder if we can encourage some veterans too, who are considering. I think veterans leadership in the military is a great transition out of retirement into local government leadership.
Right. Yep.
One of the things I see, and maybe speak to this, maybe I'm wrong, but maybe I'm onto something. I do think that it takes some humility maybe to go to a smaller city when you've had a distinguished military career, to think, maybe I need a city of 15, 25, 50,000. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with cutting your teeth. It is a different, it's two things. It is a different place of leadership and a different thing that's going on to get your teeth, sharp on that. But there's also this, that sometimes when you change sectors, like I know, like I don't have any history in local government. And so me coming into local government, people are like, well, who are you and what right do you have to? And it's like, I've been a leader of like some pretty big things. And so, but it's kind of like that. When you change sectors, sometimes you can be devalued. And so how do we encourage some people, 20 years plus of military leadership now to go, hey, what advice would you give them to encourage them to take on a position in local government?
Well, I think the number one thing that I would say is that you have an immediate impact on your community. This isn't, if you're in a major city or county, or you spent 20 years in the military doing policy, or maybe you got out as a colonel, things like that, it would take years for you to see, if ever, the impact of something that you did. You don't have that problem in local government. You are going to immediately see a policy that you put into place, or maybe you fix a road, maybe you fix a swing set for the local park that kids have wanted fixed for 10 years. It's an immediate, you feel the impact of what you're doing, for better or for worse, immediately. It can be very therapeutic, I think, for a lot of folks that are used to kind of big government, and sometimes the frustration with slow government, that you have that immediacy at the local government. It's also one of those things that the community can benefit from your years of experience in leadership, that can professionalize some of these smaller towns in ways that normally can't be done. You're bringing expertise in management and SOPs in communication that they may not have had before, and it can be transformational for that town. So you really, really can do a lot of good that may be more impactful in a smaller government than a bigger government.
So good. Okay, so we have so many things. So first off, let's encourage people to, if you are a military veteran, apply for the Hoover Institution out of the Stanford University for that fellowship. It's a great opportunity. If you are maybe not a veteran, you're a municipal manager, maybe you're new, you got to pick up the book. It's called The Municipal Battlefield, again by Dwight Boddorf. Am I pronouncing it right?
Boddorf.
It's spelled Boddorf. So you go search Dwight on Amazon, or just search The Municipal Battlefield. It'll come up. You got to check that out. And man, I am just excited. Not only, again, to think about this, Dwight, from homelessness to now a person of impact who's a part of a Stanford University fellowship, meeting with Condoleezza Rice. And I mean, how amazing is your story? And I think the biggest thing I take from it is, whoever you are, if you're young listening, if you're old listening, your life isn't done. You be a person of impact until your dying breath, and don't let negativity, don't let real storms and real things that would take you out, because you have a choice. You are a person that has that, man, talk about the mental and physical adversity that you face, that you continue to face with the challenges that you have. And yet you are mission driven. I think that's the beauty of being actually mission driven, is it's not just a pie in the sky hope. You are geared into what you're going to do, and you are then taking the steps to advance yourself, to learn, to keep on going on until you get to that place of impact. And that's really what it is, right? It's the journey. It's not really the destination. It's what we learn along the journey, because you're not waiting for impact until you become, right, the Allegheny County manager. You are a person of impact right now. You were in Stowe, you are in Tarentum, and you're going to continue to be wherever your path winds. So what an inspirational story you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much.
Well, Dwight, again, thanks for sharing your life, your leadership journey, and your insights. Go check out the book, The Municipal Battlefield. There it is, out now. Dwight, thanks again.
Thank you.
The stories we share here on the Halting Winter podcast remind us where government really lives, locally, right here in our cities, our counties, the communities that shape our everyday life. If today's conversation resonated with you, please subscribe and share the episode to help these stories reach others. I'm Seth Winterhalter. You can find me at HaltingWinter.com. Until next time, thanks for listening.